I just feel like I was getting a lot of like really difficult direct feedback. And I just felt, oh my God, I'm fucking this up every day. Like I felt every day I was like messing up at that job.
The world is obsessed with fast track success. It's easy to think that people become successful overnight. But let's face it, more often than not, what we see on social media is total BS. I'm here to look past the perception of perfect success and focus on life's detours, perceived mistakes, and even wrong choices, and understand the real road traveled up the career ladder. After all, we're all effing up. Tessa Wolf is a creative brand and merchandising leader. As the first employee at Framebridge, Tessa built the company's brand, merchandising strategy, and assortment, site experience, and omni-channel retail programs. Tessa developed and honed all consumer-facing touchpoints and recruited and grew teams to support them, incubating and scaling functions from single-person operations to 100 plus. With a total of 17 years of design, skill set development, and leadership in-house creative, marketing, merchandising, product development, and sales strategy functions, Tessa's zone of genius sits in a strategic space between art and science. Tessa is currently renovating her third house, a mid-century gem in the woods of Durham, North Carolina. She splits her time between there and the Wolf Academy, the 1803 schoolhouse she restored on Maryland's Eastern Shore.
Tessa, welcome. I'm so excited to connect with you again and learn more about your journey. Thank you for lending your time for the Ep5 podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk.
Why don't we start by you catching me up on what you're up to today?
I am currently working as a brand advisor and consultant for a bunch of different consumer brands. And I really do two functions for them. I'm either a fractional CMO or I do design work. So visual brand identity development, actually a lot of stuff that is not necessarily design, but has to do with market positioning, brand positioning, things like that. Basically, I'm a startup marketer and creative. And now I don't work in-house for a company, but I instead get to work a little bit with a lot of companies.
I'm sure we'll dive in a little bit more on the transition from in-house to out.
Yeah.
Let's dive into your background.
Yeah.
I love to start in the later teen years. However, if there's something relevant from your young childhood that you feel shaped you in a way, I would want to hit that too. If there's something that kind of rises to the top, so you'll have to let me know. But
yeah,
as you're rising through high school and starting to get the pressure of questions from everyone floating around you of, what are you going to do with your life? What are you thinking for your future? Frame that time for me.
Yeah, it's very interesting looking back at things when you were little, because I actually do have something to say about when I was really little. I've always been a really creative person. Like I've always been really into art. My mom is an art teacher and a potter. I was basically always making things and like tinkering when I was little. And I recently, my youngest sister is having a baby, and I put together like a trivia game for her baby shower. And so I was looking back through home videos and stuff. And I found, I think it was like my 7th birthday party where I was just bossing everyone around into making a really complicated friendship bracelet that had like crisscrosses and stuff. And it's just a video of me yelling at like all these other 6 or 7-year-olds. And I told my mom that I had seen that video, and she was like, yeah, that was what you were doing all the time. Like you were always reading books about how to make something, making it yourself, and then trying to make other people do it. That stuck with me through high school. I loved art. I always did art classes. And I also was really good at math. That is like just a thing about me. I think I'm just maybe better at math than other things.
And it's rare because that's both sides of the brain, right?
It is. And this is going to sound braggy, but that is a thing that people always say about me, is that I am right and left brained. And so I think that's why I have had some of the opportunities that I've gotten to have. But I was talking about my mom. My dad is a biomedical engineer, and I think in many ways I'm a lot like him too. In high school, I remember, like I said to my dad, what if I went to art school? And he was like, nice try. I think you can think about that after you go to college.
Good idea.
And yeah, he really wanted me to go to MIT because he thought I was a mad genius. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I always thought maybe it'll be something with art or whatever. And I didn't know that there were jobs exactly related to design or related to creative thinking.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of those have really emerged with this sort of startup generation. This isn't to say there weren't creative directors or weren't art directors or anything before, but I think that genre of career path has really changed a lot. And so I couldn't even have conceived that maybe I would go down this road. And I wasn't making decisions at that point thinking that maybe I could. I just didn't know. And I remember like when I was applying for college, I just had a full mental breakdown. And the day that you, like, I don't know if you experienced this, but we used to have to physically mail in the applications. And I remember like over Christmas break that I had all my applications like sitting there and I just wouldn't take them out to the mailbox I just wouldn't do the last step. And my mom was like, what is wrong with you? And I just, know what I want to do. What if this isn't right? Blah, blah, blah. And I was really horrible to her that day. I still remember this day getting in a huge, huge, huge fight with my mom. Like one of the only things I remember about applying for college.
And what do you
yeah.
think that was about? Why was that pressuring for you? Because it was just the art of putting it in the USPS box, right?
It's
no, it was obviously nature.
I think it was twofold. One was I was always a really good student in high school, and I think like many people, my parents probably had high expectations for me and wanted me to go to a great school. They never said you have to go to, they did say you can't go to art school, but they didn't say you have to go to this school or this school. It was probably the first time I really felt like imposter syndrome and thought, oh my God, what if I'm applying to all these schools and don't get in?
Yeah, if we don't mail them, we won't know. And maybe
we won't know.
Better.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that was it. I don't know. Yeah. It was like probably the first time where I feel like I really have an anxiety-induced blockage. But I did apply to a bunch of colleges just randomly. And I like good schools in the mid-Atlantic South area. I grew up in North Carolina. And also my dad is a professor at Duke. And so I think he really was like, you will be going to Duke or somewhere at Duke. And so I think I guess, felt like, what if I let them down? I still don't know if I went to the right school for me. Interesting to think about.
Oh, so you ended up at Vanderbilt. And why would you say you're not sure if that was the right school for you after that experience?
So I went to Vanderbilt. I went there because when I visited there, I just thought it was really beautiful. I liked the campus. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I thought, and also I make a lot of decisions based on like how I physically feel in a space. I went there and I just thought it was really pretty and it felt like home. And there were a lot of trees and it just felt like the right size. It just felt like a good decision. Now, looking back on it, there were a lot of things I didn't take into consideration that just probably I should have. One is it's a straight up liberal arts school. There was no option to do any design program. I majored in French and art history, which was very fun, but probably not super useful for college. I'm not sure that really matters, but I did feel like when I graduated, I didn't know how to do anything. And I always say that. I always think about that. And then also Vanderbilt, I don't know, it has this reputation, but it's really true. It's it's like a college full of people who are obsessed with social status and political stuff and specifically Greek life. And like, I did all of that and I had fun while I was there. But like when I look back on the time that I spent in college, I don't know if I was focusing on the right things or even hanging out with people that I actually don't, it's crazy. I don't keep in touch with my college friends, which is really bad. And I was friends with some really amazing, great people in college. And I've lost touch with them a little bit. And it makes me sad, which is different. I'm very close with a bunch of my high school friends and everyone I met after college. But I think sometimes I think about my college experience and I'm like, oh, did I blow it? I just feel like I don't know. I wasn't thinking enough about what I wanted to do next. Maybe that's fine, but yeah.
Spoiler alert. I think most people on this podcast have similar feelings
about college.
Yeah. But about that period of life, because it's like you're put in this box, figure it out, choose a place, go, and
Mhm.
you're like, finger to the wind. Okay, we're gonna do this. And then you like
Yeah.
choose a major, you hope it works out, you
Yeah.
switch it 5 times. It's
Totally.
really unfair to argue.
Yeah.
It's
I
like,
remember thinking, I don't even know how to write an email. I remember my very first job, but I didn't know what the word per meant, PER, like per my last email. And everyone was saying it in emails. And I was like, I don't even know this word. And I remember being like, I don't know how to like make a PowerPoint. What is a deck? How do I write a professional email?
yeah,
I didn't know how to manage a calendar. And I just felt like I had all this knowledge about random things, but didn't know how to work.
the baseline.
And
Yeah.
that stressed me after college. David, who is my husband, he also went to Vanderbilt, but we didn't know each other there. We met
Oh, really?
later. Yeah. And
How
he
funny.
majored in econ. So I
Yeah.
think he got a little bit of that. So maybe I just wasn't looking in the right places for how to.
Or maybe they
how to
should
gain
add
that.
that to the core curriculum, right?
Yeah.
Every
they should.
student should go through
Yeah.
like how do you prepare emails, how do you
Yeah.
put together a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
That's a separate
Yeah.
podcast.
Totally. I think about that a lot too when I've been in positions when I've been managing people who are right out of school. I always have to remind myself that like when I was that age, I didn't know how to work.
Yeah.
It was such a steep learning curve. And yeah, I think sometimes I have been insensitive to that as a manager.
Did you have any other challenges entering into college or navigating through college?
Yeah. I went to a big public high school. It was very easy for me. I loved it. I had a lot of fun and always did really well. At Vanderbilt, it was the first time where I was like around a bunch of other people who were also really competitive about school and doing well. And I just was like, oh, I'm not the smartest person here. And that's good. And it's good to feel that way. But I think it was like a wake up call for me to not, and I didn't bad grades or anything in college, but I wasn't leaning into academics in the way that I had before. And I would say even in the way that I did after, it's like I almost took a step back from it because I felt intimidated by maybe it was like the group of people that were there. And I think Vanderbilt is very much that way socially too. Like people are just super competitive. At least for me, I think I would retreat a little bit. I didn't care rather than trying to push forward or push through whatever was like blocking me or whatever I didn't understand.
What was it like coming upon the end of your time at Vanderbilt? Was it hard to find a job?
I did not know what I should do. That was like my biggest thing. I was like, I'm not qualified to do anything. I don't know what I should do. A lot of people had already done internships that turned into jobs. And I had done internships at art museums and things like that, but I never expected that any of those would become jobs. And I did think maybe I'll work in an art museum. Like maybe one day I could be a curator. And I did actually in college, I did a cool thing. I studied abroad in France and in the south of France. And while I was there, I got to do an internship do you know the artist Cezanne?
Of course.
Like at his studio, which is now a little museum. And so I got to give tours to Americans. And that was really cool. And even now looking back, I'm like, wow, I can't believe they let me do that. And so I did think maybe I would do that. And I had done internships at a few museums here, but really nothing materialized. And I was kicking myself because I hadn't tried harder. That was another thing is I felt like I hadn't done a good job going after something that I wanted because I didn't know what I want. And yeah, and still, I don't think it would have been the right thing for me to go work at an art museum at that point. I don't think that was the right path. And anyways, after college, I didn't know what I was going to do and basically got a job through a friend, which is, I feel a little embarrassed saying that, but it's true.
Wait, why do you feel
why
I'm saying this?
I don't know. I couldn't apply for a job myself and figure it all out. It's like I had to ask somebody for a favor. Honestly, it's not that I couldn't have gotten a job. I just didn't even know what I was looking for. I was more focused on where I wanted to be physically, like what city I wanted to be in. And so Vanderbilt's in Nashville. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina. I came back home and stayed with my parents for maybe a month or two and was like, obviously, I'm going to move to a city, but which city? And I had always loved DC and almost went to school in DC. I really always hoped that I would live there at some point. And it was like a trendy place for a bunch of people to move at that time. A lot of my friends went to UNC and they were moving to DC. And that was probably the reason that I decided I wanted to live there. And so basically I decided I need to get a job, any job in DC, because I want to live there. And so I got my first job through a friend from college's parents, basically. And I still applied for a job. There was like an open job, but they knew about it and said, maybe she'd like this. And it was for a company that made swag for a bunch of different companies. It was a small agency that basically made stuff, branded stuff, and warehoused branded stuff for certain brands. And it was a lot of just like managing those orders. It wasn't much design, but it was mostly just like customer service and tracking and managing orders. Like you're the middleman.
Logistical,
yeah, logistics stuff. But while I was there was a designer who worked there, only one, because there's not like a ton of design. You're really like putting logos on shirts, essentially. Yeah. And I remember what she always had to do was just recreate logos, because I hope this will make you laugh, as no company ever knows what a vector logo is. And so they send you like a picture of their logo, and then you actually, in order to print it on a shirt, you have to make it a vector logo.
No, we actually need the full meal deal here. Thank you.
Exactly.
Cute little thing.
And people are like, what's the difference? And then you're like, I can't even really explain it. Even to this day, it's a hard thing to explain.
Can you open it on your computer? All right, then that's not what we need.
Yeah. I need the one you can't see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I basically just kept trying to get physically closer to her desk and learn how to do this stuff. And then she started giving me some of her work because I was learning it. And so I got the company to let me get Illustrator and learn those programs. And then I took over a little bit of that and I was able to do some of it. That wasn't a lot of my work, but that was fun. And I think it was definitely the first time I had used any of those programs. It was really a basic way to learn a little bit about Adobe, essentially, and to understand what needs there are out there, even for a little swag business. And then I got a new job while I was there. I became the program manager for the clients who we actually warehoused stuff for. And so the way that would work is we had everything in our warehouse. And when they were having an event or sales conference or whatever, we would ship out the stuff that they needed to all the different places. Or if they were opening a new franchise, we would send them the stuff for that franchise. It was fun. Like I sat in the warehouse. I worked with that team. I worked like these really weird hours. So I was working with the warehouse team and I liked that. But I was like, this is never going to be relevant to my life. And then later it ended up being highly relevant, which is so funny. But yeah, and I got fired from this job, or I got let go.
Ooh,
eventually.
Here's a twist.
Yeah, I know.
Hold on. Before you get that out, I want to ask, why did you feel this was not going to be relevant to your career?
Oh, it's a good question. Because I think I was like, I'm not going to work in a warehouse. I don't think this is for me. And
again, about the physical space.
Exactly. And so I think that maybe was it. And I don't think I thought that logistics would ever be a part of my job again. I probably was thinking of, if I become a designer and I'm like in this world of design, like that's a digital thing. But the irony of that is I've really come to be obsessed with businesses that have physical products, like hard goods. I like that so much more. And so I'm thankful that I got the chance to learn a little bit about that. It made me learn the language and vocabulary of manufacturing and fulfillment. It was helpful.
So let's talk about how and why you're.
Oh, I think the reality is just like the company wasn't doing well and they needed to downsize. They basically let go of people who were in these supporting roles like I was. Like I wasn't a salesperson, a sales rep generating revenue myself. And so I think that's probably what happened. They took me to the kitchen and told me, and it was in this little office and I was mortified. That was the biggest thing. I just felt really, really embarrassed. I think embarrassed to tell my friends, probably, and my family. Also, I think I never felt like anybody really understood that job that I was doing to begin with. And so then I think I had the impression that people might think, what is this job? You work in a warehouse. What is this anyway? And you weren't good at it. And what's actually really funny, I guess this is a little bit of like revisionist history, but one of my very close friends who I met at a job later in my career, her mom, actually my first boss at this company. And we just connected the dots years later. And so I have since re-met her mom in a different context. And I remember being like, I'm like mortified to see Jamie's mom because she probably is like, this girl was so bad at working. What could she possibly be doing now? And she works with my kid. And it's funny because I told her this sort of when I met her, we met her, and she was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. That was your impression of that time because I always thought you were good at working. And I was like, why are you working here? Figure out what you want to do. Go do what you should do. There's that thing where like we always assume everybody is looking at us the same way we're looking at ourselves. And
we get in our own way.
Even now I know, I don't think that they were seeing me that way.
It sounds like they let several people go. And so it really wasn't about you. And I interviewed someone else earlier this week who was laid off, and the level of reaction was so personal.
Yeah.
I'm sure I would react the same way, but listening to it was like, wow, this really impacted you. You took it so personally, but 30% of the company or whatever was also laid off. And I just think that we tie so much of our worthiness to our work and where we are currently. So it makes sense. But on the flip side, it's almost like we wish we could shake ourselves and be like,
I know.
You, it's them. It's like a
and
breakup.
You could be like, you know what, in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, you'll realize someone will tell you we're actually fine at this job.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
That's the point of this podcast.
It's so interesting how when you're in the moment, it feels, oh my God, my life is over. And it's just more like, I think for me, like a prevailing emotion or feeling or whatever that like, I just can, things that I can never shake are things that times when I felt really embarrassed. And like a lot of my like memories from when I was little are about moments when I threw up in school. So like that, like where everybody could like see me doing something embarrassing. And of course, like as we know, as adults, I don't remember those stories about other people. So why do I assume that people remember them about me?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably how I felt in that moment.
So how did you land at Manifold Productions?
Yeah. This is such a kind of random job. My aunts, my dad's brother's wife worked in production, like movie production. This was still when I was like, I don't know what it is that I want to do. I knew I was interested in like design and things that were like creative, but I didn't know what. And she was like,
you're 2 years out of school.
Yeah, I was like probably 23. So I did not know.
Why don't I know?
She was like, oh, somebody I know who has a production company is like looking for an assistant. I can put you in touch with them. And so that's how I ended up working there. And I basically worked as a production assistant for a company that made documentaries. It's funny because that's a whole different world of logistics, but also just like primarily a logistics job.
What were the learning curves that you encountered there? Because the work was not necessarily the same.
But this job and the job following this, where I was doing events, the learning curve was like, I tend to be or can be a little bit scatterbrained and a little absent-minded, maybe. And there were these jobs where just like everything just depended on the details. And like it was my job to make sure the details worked out. And I felt like I really wasn't good at it. And it was very, very hard for me to learn. And I think I would get really harsh feedback at this production job from the producers, but also from the people we were filming, for example, who we were interviewing and their assistants and the people that I had to interface to coordinate with their schedules and their flights. And I just feel like I was getting a lot of like really difficult direct feedback. And I just felt, oh my God, I'm fucking this up every day. Like I felt every day I was like messing up at that job.
What's an example of that feedback?
This is one example. This guy we were interviewing was really tall and he had to fly somewhere for an interview. And I couldn't get him an aisle seat, even though he wanted an aisle seat. The right answer, I'm sure, for someone like this is that he probably needed to get a first class ticket or whatever. I wasn't approved to book that. So I booked him whatever ticket I could. And he was just like irate that he was like, I can't believe you put me in coach. And that you would think, he was like, I'm 6'10". Why do you think I could sit in a window seat? These are things I guess I should have known or thought about, but no one ever explicitly told me. And so I didn't know I was messing up. And I just felt like that was the thing where, everything was about details. Like another example is the documentary that I worked on primarily was about Alexander Hamilton. And this was before the Hamilton craze. And one scene that we shot was reenacting the Battle of Yorktown at Yorktown with a bunch of kids. And instead of having swords or nets or whatever, we had blow up red and blue things that they were supposed to hit each other with. Like I said, I felt every day I was messing stuff up, and it was like really, really hard. I was going home super late. And I remember the guy who was the producer was like, where are the samples? I want my kids to play with the samples tonight. And I had just gotten home, and he was like, you need to turn around and come back here and bring me the samples. And I guess that's not that big a deal, but it felt like a breaking point. I just was like, I have to get out of here. I just can't do this. And then the next day I remember they were deflated, and he was like, see, they didn't work. This is why I needed them. They didn't work. My kids destroyed them. So anyway, after we finished filming for that movie, I stopped working there. I would say it was probably mutual, but really they didn't have another project that they were starting right away. And it was a contract project-based thing. The other interesting thing about that job, which I didn't know at the time, was I was a 1099 contractor for them, even though I was working full time. And I didn't have health insurance or anything through them. And so I had to pay for all of that out of pocket. That was really hard for me when I was a kid. I was making no money to do this job anyway, and having to pay it. Yeah. So I feel like I probably lost money in the time that I was there, but also it's just like, I have a good friend who always calls this stuff life admin. And I just felt like I got really behind on life admin because I didn't have any structure. And so, it was really an interesting job because I feel like I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do.
Yeah. Did you leave? I know you were a contractor, but did you essentially part from that job before you had something else lined up, or were you in the background working
That's actually a good question. And to be honest, I can't remember exactly how the timelines worked out. I think they said to me, hey, just so you know, we're going to be wrapping production on this in the next 4 weeks. So you should start looking for something else. And so I think there wasn't much of a gap in between.
It looks like on LinkedIn, it was February to March.
Okay.
It was
So I bet you it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
But the next job that I had was just a job that I saw posted online and I applied for. And so that was the
event coordinator and designer at Food Allergy and Anaphylaxis Network.
That's right. I have food allergies myself, and so I thought this was interesting.
Okay, this is what I was so curious about. I was like, I wonder if this is a hit home sort of role, or if it just was totally random.
It was pretty much random, but it just happened to be that it was I felt connected to also, and so that worked out well. And their main fundraising was they did walks all around the country, and so they hired me to be one of the coordinators who would put on the walks. And they had to have, I feel like there were maybe 8 of us because there were multiple walks per weekend in different cities. And so we would go with 2 of us would go to Minneapolis or whatever. And 2 other people would be in Atlanta. My main job there was logistics again. And I remember I had a good friend at that job who she's great. And I met her through this, and she was really good at this job. I was like, I am so bad at this job. When I look at Amanda, I can see she's thriving, and she's one of those people. And I just felt again, I was just messing stuff up all the time. And it was really interesting because it was I remember thinking that they just made a big, big, big fuss about really little details. We had a good system for how to run these walks and how to set things up, which, for example, we sent all of our supplies to the hotel ahead of time. But because we didn't have enough things that we could send everything back in between, they had to go from location to location. So it's your job to replenish what would be missing from your kit between the 2 weekends. And I think, yeah, I just made a lot of mistakes and whatever. I feel it's funny because talking about these first 3 jobs, I feel like the prevailing feeling I had was like, I'm not good at these jobs. I don't know how to be good at these jobs. And I remember that I had a manager at this job. She was so patronizing. She would like every morning be like, I want you to come in and read me your to-do list and tell me, I want to know this. I think now that I know more, I know that she was really like a micromanager. She was a pretty junior manager and just trying to do a really, really good job herself, but it felt really suffocating.
Does that excuse the behavior then?
I think she didn't want me to mess up, and probably I needed that. And I think that I don't know that it necessarily excuses it. I learned a lot from that experience because when I ultimately started managing people, I was like, I'm not going to be like that.
Your to-do list. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But the other good thing that happened while I was there is I was like, I really want to do design. I want to do some design. And there was, again, like one designer there. And he was really nice and he was great. And I just would be like, can I help you with stuff? I would just hang around his cubicle. Eventually, they let me start doing some design stuff and they added that onto my plate. And then they let me actually switch into a design job.
Did that help
was
with
good.
did that help with the confidence at all?
I think yes, because it wasn't like a logistics specific job, but it also was, it was a job I didn't know how to do. I guess at that age, maybe you don't really know how to do anything, but it was fun for me, but also intimidating because it was like every time I was getting a new project, I had to learn how to do it before I could do it.
Yeah.
And so it was great because I am someone who loves learning how to do things just by doing them and reading about how to do them and learning from other people. And so for me, that actually gives me confidence in a job. Whereas I think these other jobs that I had been bad at before were more like, we have a set way of doing things. It has to be like this, do it this way, do it exactly this way, follow these steps. And I would always be like, this is the dumbest way to do it. We could just streamline things by doing things this way. And there just was no room for flexibility on process.
Yeah.
And I think those were the things that I wasn't good at. And then after this job, I started to get my stride, I think.
Before we go there.
Yeah.
So you've had 3 roles now where you've felt failure, where you felt like, I'm not good enough. I'm trying everything I can. I'm not getting the details in the way you want. I'm getting harsh feedback. How is this manifesting for you when you're going home at night?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to answer this in a backwards way, which is I think it probably had a lot more impact on me later once I started finding things that felt like more of a fit because I could really recognize that they were different. I was basically like, work sucks. My job always sucks. Jobs suck. And I think that's how everyone was acting about their jobs at the time. And I was in DC in my like early 20s and we were going out all the time. And like, I definitely was having a lot of fun outside of work. Like it just was like work was a thing that I did in between the other things I wanted to do. In the year or two following that, it just completely flipped. And so I think it's very interesting to think back to these first few jobs where I felt like, yes, I felt like a failure. Because I just had a different perspective on what work was and what it should bring to your life. And so I probably felt a little embarrassed about that stuff, but the way that maybe it manifested was I don't care about work. So what does it matter? I also think at these first few jobs, I don't know how much this played into it, but I was making so little money. And I think that's the case with many people's first few jobs, but I didn't feel motivated by the work I was doing or like any recognition or lack thereof that I was getting for that work, or even really by the money. And so I think that there's an interesting thing where I was like, yeah.
You're not going to motivate me. You're not going to pay me more than I'm going to get what you get.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty close to how I felt. It's really interesting to think about this because I just can't imagine it now because I really did end up completely flipping these parts of my life.
Do you end up, is it Lyft brands or you say LYF?
It was called Life,
Life.
LYF pronounced. Yeah. So
Oh,
this was
of
like
course. Very
this
hip.
was a startup. It was a
Mm.
startup in DC. They were making assorted different things. They had not figured out what products they were going to be selling. And they were advertising for someone to do comms for them. I didn't want to stay at the food allergy and anaphylaxis job, primarily because it was far away and I had to drive and there was a long commute.
Mm.
And I had a feeling that I wanted to work at a startup. And I remember, interestingly, at this time, Living Social had already come to DC. And so I had some friends who were working at Living Social and into this startup thing. And this is a spoiler, but I ultimately ended up going to Living Social. But I think I'd been hearing about it and I want to work for a startup. And so I found out that this startup was hiring someone and they hired me to do marketing and communication for them. And interestingly, again, I was not hired for design, but I got to sit with the designers and got to be really close. And they eventually just gave me a Mac and were like, whatever, you can do it. And so I just kept doing more and more and more design in the job. I was into the startup culture of it all. And I think it was the first time I felt that feeling just a little bit. And so I had fun there. Ultimately, the company moved to Florida. And I even thought about moving to Florida for that job. I went down there with them to look at office spaces. It was not the right fit. And I'm very glad I didn't do that. But it was the first time where I had been at a job where they really valued me.
Mm.
They wanted me to come and they wanted me to be a part of the next phase of the company. I just hadn't had that feeling before.
Why wasn't it the right fit?
There were weird vibes. When the company started out, it was going to, culturally for sure. But even more like it was going to be D2C. And then they pivoted to being like a multi-level marketing company. And it like never really was like getting off the ground. And I was like, I do not want to work for an MLM.
Gotta love startups and their pivot.
Exactly. It felt a little weird, felt shady. And so that was, and I didn't want to leave DC.
So then what is the feeling you're having now? So you've found a place where you feel valued.
Yeah.
You're getting into your stride. You're liking the work more. And now it's a matter of fit. Like,
yeah, I think I was like, I can't go back to a normal job. Like now I have to work for a startup. Like now I need to work for a startup. I had this feeling. And I think this is a thing that continues with my startup career beyond this is like, what I loved was that they let me do a lot of different things. And I think what I had hated about these jobs I had before was like, I had a narrow scope of work and just did that thing all the time. And basically I had a friend who worked at Living Social and we were friends just from DC. And the woman he used to work with was a department head at Living Social and she was looking for someone on her team. And he was like, I really think you should apply for this job because you'd be really good at it. And it was a program manager job. And so I did, and I interviewed with this woman, Susan, who I still have a long working relationship with. So I'll talk a lot more about her. But yeah, I interviewed with her and I didn't hear anything back for a long time. And then maybe a month later or something, they asked me if I wanted to come back in again. And then I met a bunch of people and they gave me the job. That was the first time where I was like, I really have to get this job. This is the one I wanted to go. And this was while I still was working for the other company. So it wasn't like, oh, immediately I need a job. It was more like, I don't want to move to Florida. I'm going to have to start applying for normal jobs. I really hope this works out because I just had a feeling about it.
Was it everything you hoped once you got in?
Yeah, it was. How many people worked there when I started working there? A few hundred, maybe. I think in the end, maybe it was 3,000 or 4,000. Like it was very big. And it was growing. The product was daily deals. That was like this huge trend. Living Social was a Groupon competitor.
It was for sure a cool kid company.
It was. And there's no consumer tech in DC. There were no real startups. I'd worked for this weird small one, and that was like really the only other one I knew about. And when I started working at Living Social, it was just like, it just felt, oh my God, like this door has been opened and now I understand what work should be for me. It was everything all at once. It's like you have this great social community and you get to work with people you like, and everybody you're working with thinks kind of the way you do. And you get to work on hard things and you get to have responsibilities you really shouldn't be allowed to have. And and it was always moving like a million miles an hour. And I loved that because it felt really different from how it had in the past. And it was fun. And the company was doing really well for a while. And there's nothing more fun than working for a startup that's growing like this when you're a part of that. One really cool thing about Living Social, I was just saying this, I think to my dad the other day, actually, is like, it's no longer, but all the people we worked with there have gone on to do really cool things. So it was like a interesting collection of smart, motivated people who just were all in the same place at the same time. Culturally, we had an advantage because, like I said, in the area, Living Social was really the only type of company like this. Anybody who was interested in being in the startup space and wanted to work in this way wanted to be there.
And it looks like you had a role change about just after about a year and a half. Was that a promotion? And what came with that?
Yeah. And that was the first, maybe the only time in my career, honestly, where somebody left a different position and they were like, we're going to hire a new person for this role. And they said, do you want to apply for it? I had been working on these two verticals within the business, families and at home. So family deals were our best deals, were always like the San Diego Zoo. They were zoos and water parks and corn mazes and things like that. And our job was to package up these deals and set them up in like an ideal way and then encourage the sales team to go out and pitch them and sell them. A lot of what I was doing was like helping them with pitch materials, doing research, getting things together so that they could go out and sell the deal. Basically, I was doing this program management job for the two verticals, and then a job opened up on the sales ops team, which was like more closely aligned to the sales team than it was to the sort of vertical parts of the business. It was the main sales team. And it was like a step up from the job I had been doing. And it was not specific to verticals. It was for the whole business. But still, my job was largely to basically package up programs and campaigns and initiatives so that the sales team could turn around and sell them to merchants. That's what we called them.
Got it.
Those were the businesses that we sold the deals to.
Were you managing people at Living Social?
Yes, actually, yes. In my first role at Living Social, I originally was hired as an individual contributor. And Susan, I think that the timing of this was worked out this way. She was pregnant and I got like the opportunity to basically be the head of our little department while she was out on. That was really nice for me because I got exposure to a lot of other teams. I got to be the person who went to the meetings, the cross-functional groups. As part of that, I did manage the other people on our team. And then when Susan came back, her role expanded and I continued managing those two people. And then when I moved into the new role on the other team, I was managing a larger team as part of that.
Were there challenges at Living Social?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The biggest one is that, like, at the beginning, it was a huge success, but then this was a fad. This was like a trend as a product. And so it stopped working. And we were just saturating everyone's inboxes with tons and tons and tons of deals. And we were not selling like we were originally. And so we kept having to look for new business opportunities and units. We started selling stuff. Living Social was B2B2C, and it started to fail in both the consumer and business fronts because pitch always was like, this is great for your business. We'll bring you new customers. And then once they have a great experience with you, they'll keep coming back to you. You can retain them as a customer. And what we found was like, that really wasn't true. And people were having not great experiences when they would go to redeem their deal. Say they were going to a restaurant, the restaurant would potentially not give them the same level of service as someone who was not paying with a deal. And the merchants became resentful and they were losing money on these deals. And that ultimately was felt by the customers. And that's when I started feeling what it feels like a lot at a startup, which is that you're just scrambling to find the next thing that you can do to help save what's going on.
Yeah. Were you
And so,
there
yeah.
during any restructuring or layoffs?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That happened a few times. I never got laid off from my job there. So I was really lucky. But you'd sit at your desk and know that layoffs were happening that day. And you just had to wait and find out if you got one of the vague meeting invites. I knew a lot of people who got laid off, and that happened many times because the company had grown too big, too fast, and ultimately couldn't sustain growth. It was scary. And I think the other thing you asked if there were challenges, I got so into my work. I was working super late. Like I would stay at the office late and then come home and work again and again. I felt like I was really indispensable, especially when I was in the second role on the sales ops team. And I was. They needed me to get things done. I felt like I had my hands in too many things. And I remember we had a sales conference with all the salespeople in town. And I remember that Jen, who was the woman who was like the head of the whole sales org, she was up on stage, like doing the intro, and she like gave me a special shout out. And I remember that she said, let's everybody just give a hand for Tessa. This woman has a capacity for work like I've never seen before. And I remember thinking, oh God, that's like what they think of me. Like I will do anything. I will work at all hours to do whatever. And I think that is a prevailing theme in my work life from that point forward. And it started out because I wanted to. And then I feel like I got in too deep.
I got to this point in my career where I was like, I ruined myself by setting the bar at 150% or whatever you want to say. And then when it came time to me wanting to make boundaries and pull back, which by the way would still have been me giving 110% or whatever, it was impossible because people were like, oh, you're dropping off a cliff. And no, you realize it's still more than you would have gotten from someone else.
Yeah.
It felt very much like the only way for me to change this is to leave this company.
Yeah.
So I could start afresh. And then how do you start in something and set the right bar and know that's going to be sustainable?
Yeah. I just relate so much to this story. Like that's exactly that is my biggest struggle.
It's like an impossible task for me.
Yeah.
As a perfectionist as well, I don't know how I'd start a job and set myself up for success in that realm.
Right.
It almost feels impossible.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to sound like a martyr, but it's a flaw, right? It's something I had so much pride in for so many years. And then you reach this point of adulting where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I
know.
need physical space. And you just don't know how. You've created some very horrible routines for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm jumping way ahead, but this is so true for me too. And ultimately my body started like falling apart. Like first my appendix had an emergency appendectomy. And I don't know, you don't know if all these things are connected. And ultimately the biggest thing that ever happened to me was that I had a stomach tumor, and I went through this like horrible experience of having a tumor and only finding out about it because I had these like bleeding ulcers. I will never believe in my whole life that this was not related to stress and not related to burnout, because I just think sometimes you get so far in that the only thing that can pull you out is like your body forcing you to do it. And I really agree. And I think that it's hard when you associate yourself or your identity with not just the work that you've done, but how hard you work and like how much you care, because then you feel like you can't take a step back or you can't change your approach because that's what's expected of you.
Yeah, for sure. And being very black and white, which as an artist, you might not identify with, I don't know, but being black and white, it's either I'm really great or I'm awful.
Yeah.
There's no in between, which, oh my gosh, like ridiculous. But okay, I definitely want to dive into that if you're comfortable when it comes time.
Yeah.
So what then ended your time? You were at Living Social for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, the company is
Yeah. It feels like it
starting
was like
to
10. But yeah,
the company's
it's
starting to
crazy.
implode, explode,
Yeah.
however you want to describe it. How did you end up at Framebridge?
Susan, who's the woman who hired me for my first job at Living Social. Remember I told you we worked on these at-home deals. And
Yeah.
one of the deal categories that fell into at home was custom framing. And I remember that everybody hated custom framing deals, like customers in the end, because they would sell a ton. The way they were structured was like $100 for $200 to spend on custom framing at the frame shop in your neighborhood. And people would be like, oh, great, I got it for 50% off. And then they'd go to custom frame something and get a quote for $1,600. And so they'd come back to us and be like, I'm not going to frame something for $1,600. This is a ripoff. And so those deals were always refunded. Susan was like, somebody really should like disrupt custom framing. This is like such a racket. And when I moved into that other role at Living Social, she wasn't my manager anymore. She ultimately left Living Social and went somewhere else and worked on a different product for a while. But she had in her mind that she wanted to do something with custom framing. And she came back to me maybe, I don't know, a few months after I had been in the new role and was like, I think I might try to do a framing company. Would you want to do it with me? She went to learn how to be a custom framer. She went to some classes and things like that. And basically we worked together to model out what this business could look like and put together pitch materials. And she went out and pitched it and raised money. And then I left Living Social and joined her on the first day. And my boss at Living Social got a copy of the pitch deck with me in it. So that he found out. That's how he found out. And I remember they had just given me a bonus and they took it.
No.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my
that?
God, I hope this is worth it. It was worth it.
That probably solidified your decision. You're like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
you're going to take my bonus away. See you later.
I know.
What do I have to lose?
I think we officially got the money in February 2014, and I left Living Social and started that the day after working with Susan.
Wow. Framebridge is a huge name. You were there for almost 8 years.
Yeah.
Clearly something stuck, if you will.
Yeah.
And you also went through several role changes during your time there. It feels like on paper, it's lightning in a bottle again.
I don't know if it had the same lightning in a bottle feeling as Living Social because it wasn't like thousands of people it wasn't ever as big really feeling. But for me, it was like my personal lightning in a bottle. And I still don't think I will ever do anything again that is as I identify with as closely as Framebridge. And I should say, I actually still work with them. They are a client of mine, and I am lucky that I still get to be a part of it because I feel like I'm going to cry even thinking about it. It was like very emotional for me to leave because it was my whole identity.
I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but why did you?
So I had been there, like you said, for I think it was about 8 years. I had done so many different jobs there. I was the first employee and I basically got to incubate pretty much every consumer facing function there and then ultimately hired somebody else to take it over. The job that I did most of the time I was there was creative. I was the creative director, and it was great because I think this is a theme with startups. I don't think that I could have gone and been the creative director at another company because I had never done it before. But I had worked with Susan and she knew that I could do it. I also got to be the head of merchandising the whole time that I was there too. And that was something that we actually didn't formalize as a function until way later. And so that's interesting. And I'll talk a little more about that. The last year that I was there, Framebridge was acquired. So in 2020, Framebridge was acquired by one of our investors. And then the next fall is when I left. So I stayed on a little after that, and it was great and it was fun. And ultimately, I just felt like I really needed a break. I was like at a breaking point. I did a sabbatical. Susan gave me the option to do a sabbatical. And so the summer of 2021, I left The job I was leaving at that time was CMO, and I had been over marketing and merchandising, which was a bigger job than I'd ever had there, because even though I'd always done creative and brand and merchandising, I didn't have ownership over growth. And I did during this time. I learned a lot, and it was really hard. There were something like 35 people indirectly reporting into me, and I think I had 12 direct reports. It was just too much, I think, for me as one person to do. And so I really think I was at a breaking point. And so I did this sabbatical, and I took the summer off. And Susan was like, I don't want you to think about work. Just do whatever you want. And the only thing I did was think about work. Also, this was during COVID. So that, of course, was unfortunate, because it's not like I was like, I'm going to travel the world. I didn't have anything really to do. And I just was obsessed with Framebridge. And I was really stressed that stuff was going on and I didn't know what it was. And I couldn't be a part of it. They didn't want me to be, they wanted me to have this time off. One day I went on the site to frame something myself, and there was like something wrong in one of the flows. And I was just irate. And I just started writing an email, like freaking out about it. And then I just had this realization where I was like, oh yeah, nobody cares about this except me. And what I realized is my only option actually is to leave. I have to leave, because it was like, I cared way, way too much, like to just a degree that I never thought I could about anything. And I just felt like the way that I felt when I was forced to not work on Framebridge for a little while, and it was still the only thing I cared about and the only thing I could think about, made me realize just I have to get my life together. I have to leave. And I didn't come back after the sabbatical. And it was really hard. And I didn't know what I was going to do. That's when I started consulting.
Did that affect your relationship with Susan?
Yeah, definitely. But she and I have such a great and also complicated relationship, because we've worked together for 15 years. I think the thing that was hardest for me, and maybe for her too, was like, she didn't fight for me to stay. And I remember her saying something like, I met her for lunch one day, and that's how we had this conversation. And I think I was prepared to like offer you a different role and switch these things and do these things and try to make it so you could stay. And she was like, but I just feel like I don't want to give you that option at this point, basically, because I hear that you need to leave. And so I left. I'm so emo about it still. And the thing I didn't even talk about is I have a personal obsession with interior design and just anything related to home design. And I just feel like, my God, like I got so lucky that I got to work on something that was both a startup, and I'm obsessed with startup culture and this way of working, and also that had 100% overlap with my personal creative interests. That was amazing. And it was also really bad, because I was never not thinking about it, even when I was like out living my life, because every ounce of my creative energy was going right to Framebridge. And another thing that we did during COVID, David, my husband, and I bought an old schoolhouse on the Eastern Shore of Maryland and renovated it. And it's from 1803. It was very
stunning. Stunning.
It was like in disrepair when we bought it. It had, somebody in the 80s had made it into a bed and breakfast, which actually was great for us because it was already set up with 3 bathrooms and 3 bedrooms. We didn't have to do too much structurally to the house, but we did completely and fully renovate it top to bottom. And that in and of itself was like such an eye-opening experience, because it was another place for my creative energy to go. And that really, combined with the sabbatical, made me realize like, I am too, like, this was Framebridge and this is me. And I am just too 100% overlapped with my work life and my personal life. And that like, maybe there is a world where I can have my own things that I love and that I'm working on and that I put my ideas into, that are separate from work.
When did your health take a turn during your work journey?
Probably the last 4 years that I was at Framebridge, I'll never know for sure, like suffering from ulcers, because when I finally did get the tumor out, I'm jumping around in the story, but they told me I'd probably had it for 10 years. And the only way I even found out about it was because I had these ulcers that were bleeding. And basically I had experienced that same feeling on and off for a few years before that, and was just like taking medicine to treat essentially like acid reflux. And that was what the doctors were recommending. And interestingly, that's actually also how you treat ulcers. And so I was treating the ulcers without knowing that there was an underlying thing, and actually without knowing they were ulcers. And when I was so stressed, I was also not sleeping. And it's a little bit hard for me to know like what, but these two things seemed like they were compounding one another. I was in pain and would wake up in the middle of the night, like in pain. And I thought it was like just anxiety related. I'm sure that anxiety was making it worse. I was thinking about work all night long, working, coming home from the office and working until late, like completely neglecting everything else in my life, my family, my friends, my other relationships, etc. And I really was like, oh, I'm just so burned out. I'm so stressed that it's manifesting in this like anxiety and not being able to sleep. That was when I started realizing I have to change something because this isn't sustainable. And I struggled with that for a few years. I changed some things in my life. Like I started seeing a therapist and a coach, and those people really, really, really helped me. But the physical symptoms like never really went away. In February 2021 was when the appendix thing happened. So I was at Framebridge and I literally was on a work call. This will give you an idea of how I was acting at the time. I was on a work call and had a pain, and I had been dealing with it for a couple of days. So I decided to do a telehealth. And I was worried about missing the call that I was on. So I didn't even hang up on the call that I was on. So I like had it going in the background. And I remember like that this telehealth call just started, and I was like, oh God, trying to like, the doctor was like, stand up, walk back, stand up and like point on your body where it hurts. And I did that. And he was like, you're not going to like this. You have to go to the ER. And I was like, why? And he was like, I think it could be your appendix. And even if you go to urgent care or regular doctor,
They're going to send you away.
Yeah, they're going to send you to the ER. So just go. And so I did that and ultimately had to get my appendix out. I was out of work for 2 weeks after that. And that really shook me up. And that sucked because it was like I wasn't prepared for it. I hadn't done anything to prepare for it. I was also terrified of being in the hospital during COVID. I really felt helpless. David had to take care of me. And that really opened my eyes to like, I've gotten in too deep with work. That was my takeaway during the time. Now, this was about 3 months before I did the sabbatical. And I had already decided at that point that I had to make a change. This is just reinforced that decision. And so I did the sabbatical, and ultimately I didn't come back to Framebridge. And then I began consulting. And then about 6 months later is when the whole tumor thing happened. And that was like really, really, really bad. I remember being like, why is this happening? I already learned the lesson. I already left. I already made the life change. Like, I don't need this now. When that happened, I had to stop working again. And this time I couldn't work for 4 months. And I was in the hospital for 2 weeks at the beginning, then went home for 2 weeks and then had surgery. I was in the hospital again for 2 weeks. And then basically was in bed all summer 2022 and really couldn't do anything. And it's weird when I look back on the time because I don't even remember what happened during that summer. It's like nothing. I felt like I had already learned my lesson, but I was still like really hustling and working really, really hard as a consultant. And then this bad thing happened and I was in the hospital a lot and I thought I was going to die. And lots of people go through that and have these big awakenings. But I think my awakening was just like, you can't make any more decisions based on work, based only on work. And so the big thing that we changed after that was I grew up in North Carolina in Durham, and it's a great place. We moved here. He had been wanting to think about moving to North Carolina, and I was really hedging on that decision because I thought what if I end up getting another job and you have to be somewhere specific? And when I was in the hospital, I was like, oh, this is stupid. If we want to go to North Carolina, we should just go there and then we'll figure out the job stuff later. Like the job shouldn't be your number one priority. We moved here in September last year. So literally I got out of bed in July, late July probably, and didn't start working again, I think, until September. And I went back and started working with a few of my consulting clients at that point, but didn't really fully ramp up until probably January of this year, 2023. But we moved here and it was a good change.
Yeah.
And we still have the schoolhouse. So we
Yeah.
get to go back there.
That's really nice.
I also feel like just super connected to it because I went through all these personal experiences, like literally in that house and while we were working on that house.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the day that I had I call it Bloody Sunday, but the horrible day that I had to go to the hospital, found out about the ulcers and tumor, it was because we were working on the laundry room and we were installing cabinets. And it was so hard. Like it was so much harder than it should be. Like just lifting up the cabinets. And David was like, what's going on with you? And the next day, like figured out that this is what was going on. A lot of me is wrapped up in that house.
I'm curious how you, in your business now, protect yourself or if you feel like you can.
I think I do. And I would say probably to a degree that I need to like the back off of a little bit. I am like maniacal about my time management and about when clients can have access to me. And I force myself to take vacation. We just 2 days ago got back from Sweden. Pretty much I'm billing for my hours, depending on how I price the project. It may literally be hourly, or it might just be that I myself am allocating a certain number of hours to get something done. So I'm really, really careful about my hours. And I started out consulting and I told myself, like, I'm not going to work on Fridays. That was never probably realistic. But now I'm at the point where I try not to take meetings on Fridays so I can get stuff done. It's the boundaries thing. It's just my biggest learning is it's all on me, right? Like people will respect my boundaries if I respect them too.
Yeah.
And so I try really hard if a client emails me or texts me late at night to not answer until the next day or not do work on the weekends, unless I make a choice to say, a couple weeks ago, I did something on a Thursday on purpose and said, okay, in order to do this, I'm going to work on Sunday. And then I feel like I'm in control and that's okay. The parts I don't love are that I don't feel as connected to the work as I did in-house at Living Social or at Framebridge. And I think that's good for me. And it's also a little bit bad because I don't feel the like rush of excitement. It's like I can be working on a project for a consulting client and it can be going really well and I can love it. And I'm at this level of excitement. But like the excitement I used to feel was like here. A couple weeks ago, I went to the Framebridge factory with the team and just to basically do a week-long workshop as a consultant. And it was like really good and bad, but it was interesting to me because I felt like that week, like I slept terribly. I was in a hotel. I slept terribly. I felt like I couldn't catch up on my work until late at night when I was back at the hotel. I was, as I told you before, I have food allergies. And so I had to have all these like weird dietary things and I couldn't eat normal food. And I felt, oh my God, I just feel like complete shit. And it made me realize this is how I probably felt all the time before. And I was just like comfortable living.
You put up with it.
Yeah. And it was a good reminder. Oh, you let all these things fall to the wayside because you felt like that was normal. You felt like that's how you wanted to work. And I just did it for a few days a couple weeks ago. And I was like, oh my God, should I ever do this? So bad. But that's on me, right? Those are because of me letting down my boundaries. I will always crave the feeling of being in-house at a startup. And I also would hope that if I do it again, that I could go into it with a really different mindset.
If you could go back and speak to your sub 20-year-old self, what would you say?
I think it might be like, You will learn more about what you should be doing by having experiences that you hate, and like by failing. You learn through process of elimination. And so what that means is like your path to getting to wherever you should be is not going to look like you think it will. But don't panic, because eventually you're going to get there.
That is the point right there. I want to jump into
Yeah.
some rapid fire questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
How do you define success?
Probably being able to spend your days the way that you want, like the mix of your day, the way that you want, and to make enough money doing that so that you have the freedom to make decisions on your own about your time.
You mentioned something briefly at the top, but your dream job as a very young child.
As a very young child, I think I wanted to be an art teacher like my mom. Like I always wanted to be a teacher, was always practicing being a teacher.
And now look at you. You're basically teaching others.
In a back
roundabout way.
Yeah.
What's your path not taken?
I maybe still one day will take it, but I sometimes think I would like to be an interior designer.
You basically are.
I get to do it for fun. Maybe that's even better. But
yeah. We've covered this a bit, but how is stress manifested for you most consistently?
For me, actually, I didn't say this before, but when I'm really stressed out, I just get too overwhelmed to do a good job at any of the things that I'm doing. And so I think it's, if I can't step out of the swirl feeling, then I know that I can't even deliver for the things that I've committed to. And then, of course, it has physically manifested for me in health stuff.
Yeah. What is the company on your resume that turns the most heads?
Framebridge, for sure. And I think I'm very lucky that even people, it turns heads for people, even if they don't know the company, which is interesting. And people think it's really cool to have been at a startup as the first employee. That's cool no matter what. And to get to stay there through acquisition is really special.
I'd like you to use 3 labels for 3 of your jobs.
Okay.
Love, ultimate fun, skip.
Okay. I think Framebridge is love. Living Social is ultimate fun. Skip. I'd probably skip the production company. I would say the startup before Living Social, but that's where I got the bug. So yeah. The production company where I had to come back with the blow up swords in the middle of the night. That's the skip.
Tessa, thank you so much for your time and your
welcome.
story. I've so enjoyed getting to know you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for thinking of me for this.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Effing Up. I'm your host, Deanne Reiner. If you enjoyed today's episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe on the platform you use to listen to podcasts. Share Effing Up with others, post about it on social media, and or leave a rating and review. Until next time, count your perceived failures as part of your path to success. After all, we're all effing up.